You ever walk into a place and feel the temperature drop? Not because of the air conditioning, but because of something you can't quite name? That's what happened the moment she stepped into Garrison's Supply on a Tuesday morning. Sun was boiling the blacktop outside, but inside that little hardware store, time itself seemed to freeze. She wasn't tall, wasn't loud, wore an old gray coat 2 sizes too big, hood halfway up despite the heat. Her left cheek and neck, burned like wax melted uneven, glowed pale against the rest of her skin. People pretended not to stare, but they stared. Of course they did. That's the world we live in. I was third in line, holding a busted regulator for my propane tank. Figured I'd patch up the camper grill before the weather turned. I wasn't looking for trouble, just parts. Behind me, 2 young moms, all teeth and leggings, giggled loud enough for her to hear. "Halloween come early," one of them muttered. The other snorted. Then came the voice behind them. Low, steady, old. "Shut your mouth." We turned. Guy in desert camo cap. Patches faded from sun and memory. Big hands. Scar over his knuckles. He wasn't tall, but something about him took up space. He was staring at her forearm. She had it half tucked into her sleeve, but the ink was there. Unit tattoo. Something rare. Foreign script curled around a trident and a snake. I didn't recognize it. He did. He took off his cap. That simple. Took it off like he was in church. Then he stepped forward and said one thing. "Galat 7, you were there." The woman didn't flinch. She didn't nod either. She just looked at him. For a moment, the world shrunk down to them, and the air inside that place went taut like piano wire. He shook his head, eyes glassy. I owe you my spine." Silence. Then the register beeped. Time snapped back. The moms shuffled out. I paid for my part. She disappeared into the parking lot like smoke. That was the first time I saw her. The second time, she was pushing a mop around Ruby's diner. Same burned face, same quiet. Didn't look up when I came in, just cleaned the same spot near the jukebox over and over, like she was scrubbing ghosts out of the tile. I sat at the counter, ordered coffee, and watched folks pretend not to notice her. Funny thing is, when I came home from the road, after my wife passed, after 35 years hauling freight, I thought the hardest part would be the stillness. But it ain't. It's seeing what people become when they think no one's watching. They called her Scorchy behind her back. Said she was some drifter, maybe a fake vet. One guy swore she lit her own house on fire for insurance. All lies, but no one cared. It was easier to make monsters than admit we broke our heroes. I didn't say nothing. Just drank my coffee. Watched her work. She moved like someone who'd learned not to expect kindness. Later that week, the veteran from the store, turned out his name was Howell, showed up at Ruby's. Limped in on a cane, ordered biscuits, and sat 2 stools from me. "You see her?" he asked. I nodded. She kept 30 of us alive. In a compound that didn't officially exist. Med tech, no backup, no sleep, no damn food. We called her the Widow Angel. She didn't flinch when the mortars hit. She was fireproof. I looked at her. Still mopping. Still small. Still silent. Why don't you tell folks that?" I asked. Howell laughed bitter. "Because she won't. And we signed papers. Papers that make your silence a condition of your pension. That stuck with me. The next morning, I found a flyer in my mailbox. Petition from the local Veterans Council, urging removal of a fraudulent individual posing as a service member. Had a blurry photo of her at the diner. No name, just imposter. I crumpled it up, but the others didn't. They started whispering louder. She got fired from Ruby's 2 days later. They said she was scaring customers. I tried to catch her, ask her side. But she was gone. Vanished. Like she'd never been there. Left behind nothing but mop water and silence. I stood alone on the cracked sidewalk with sun-peeling paint off the diner awning and a sour taste in my mouth. And that was when I realized something. The war never ends. It just changes uniforms, and I wasn't ready to let it win. Not again. You'd think, in a place like Hartley, population 3,000 and change, folks would mind their own business. But that's the thing about small towns. They remember what they want to, and forget what's inconvenient. And when it comes to people like her, the forgetting comes easy. A week passed. No sign of her. Diner went back to its usual rhythm. Eggs, gossip, and grudges reheated like bad coffee. But I couldn't let it go. Something about the way she disappeared scratched at me like a burr in an old boot. You don't just vanish unless you've done it before. I stopped by Ruby's one morning, hoping maybe she'd come back for her last check or just out of stubbornness. She hadn't. But I noticed something. A chair near the back, the cushion split open, foam guts spilling out, had been sewn shut. Crude, uneven stitches. Done by hand. Same thread I'd seen, looped through her coat sleeve. She'd fixed a broken thing and left it better than she found it. Didn't ask. Didn't sign it. Just did it. That afternoon, I drove out to the edge of town where the river bends and the trailer parks start. It's the kind of place folks call temporary, but live in for years. I asked around. An old man named Benny, with a smoker's cough and cataract eyes, told me he'd seen a woman matching her description walking toward the floodplain 3 nights back, carrying a duffel. I followed the trail down past the old grain silo, through brush that hadn't seen a mower since the Eisenhower administration. There, tucked under a bent sycamore, half camouflaged by tarps and brush, was a makeshift camp. Empty. Just a rusted pot, a rolled sleeping mat, and a Ziploc bag pinned to a tree with a nail. Inside the bag, a single Polaroid. 6 men in fatigues, caked in dust, arms slung over shoulders. 1 woman among them. Burn scars fresh, face unreadable. But her eyes held something steady, like a lighthouse in a war zone. I left the photo where it was. Didn't feel right taking it. Next morning, I stopped by the Veterans Council building. Said I was looking to file an appeal. The secretary, a retired major, with a voice like gravel and perfume that could knock out a bull, handed me a form and didn't look up. I asked her, casual-like, if she knew anything about the woman folks were whispering about. Her lip curled. You mean the fraud? That's all being handled. We don't need fake heroes diluting the honor of real service. You check her records? She froze. Blinked. Classified, apparently. That's convenient, isn't it? I wanted to snap back. Ask if she'd ever been shot at while treating a bleeding teenager in a desert bunker. But I didn't. I just folded the form and walked out. 2 nights later, I saw Howell again. He was sitting on the tailgate of his truck behind the VFW, drinking from a can wrapped in paper like that made it invisible. "She's not coming back," he said, before I even opened my mouth. "You know where she went?" He nodded toward the hills. "Up there, where the towers die and the maps lie." She always preferred ghosts to people. We sat in silence for a while. I thought about my wife, about the way her hand used to rest on the windowsill as she waited for me to come home from long hauls. That quiet loyalty. That quiet pain. They're trying to erase her," I said. They already did," Howell answered. "The day she signed those damn papers." I drove home that night with the radio off. In my driveway, I saw something tucked under my wiper blade. A napkin, folded tight. Inside, written in tiny, neat print. "Don't fight for me. They only listen when you fall." No name. But I knew it was her. She was watching. And suddenly, it wasn't about her anymore. It was about what they were turning this place into. The next morning, I opened my old war chest. Not metaphorically. I mean the actual one. Olive drab, dented, with a handle that always stuck on the left side. Hadn't touched it in 15 years. Inside, letters, maps, a photo of my wife at 19, and one dusty ID tag with a blood type they almost got wrong. I pulled out what I needed and started making plans. Because sometimes you don't fight for people. Sometimes you fight for the truth they carry, even if they don't want you to. The next few days, I moved quiet, like I used to when hauling a load through icy mountain passes. Eyes open, hands steady, no sudden moves. I knew I couldn't charge in swinging. This wasn't that kind of fight. This was the slow, rotting kind. The kind that eats you from the inside out, while everyone around smiles and says, "It's fine." I started with the church bulletin board. Small-town politics always leave a paper trail. And sure enough, pinned between bake sale flyers and a notice about lost reading glasses was a new letter from the Veterans Council. Formal language. Accusations wrapped in polite venom. Unsubstantiated claims of service. Emotional manipulation. Potential harm to our community's trust. They were coming after her with words like scalpels. I took the letter. Didn't ask. Just yanked the pin out and folded it into my jacket pocket. Next stop. The library. Miss Evelyn ran the place like a vault. Nothing escaped her. I asked if she remembered the woman from the diner. She adjusted her glasses, squinted, and said, "The one who always read the war journals. Never checked them out. Just sat quietly with them in the corner." That was her. Miss Evelyn gave me a stack. Old news clippings, veteran interviews, lists of fallen medics. And buried in a feature from 2008 about a hospital base in northern Iraq, there she was. No name, just a photo. Half her face hidden by a surgical mask. Hands covered in blood and sand. Pressing gauze into the chest of a man with wide, panicked eyes. I didn't need to see more. I already believed her, but now I had fire. On a hunch, I stopped by the high school. Coach Tanner owed me a favor from back when his truck broke down, and I lent him mine for 2 weeks without charge. I asked if his civics class still did that Veterans Outreach program. "Sure do," he said. "Kids collect stories from local vets, make a binder every year." He handed me a dusty binder with years scribbled on the spine. 2009. I flipped through, page after page of typed interviews, scanned photos, letters, Then I saw it. A handwritten note, careful cursive. I never wore a uniform, but I wore the blood of dozens. I held them when they screamed for mothers, prayed for forgiveness, begged to die. I wasn't a soldier. I was the hands they clung to when no one else would come. Initialed SR. I copied it. Put the binder back. That night, I stopped sleeping. Something about the way she'd written that note. It wasn't a plea for attention. It was a confession. Like she was afraid someone might think she wanted credit. But what shook me most wasn't her words. It was the fact that no one had cared enough to read them. I started building something. Not a speech, not a protest. A wall. I found an old bulletin board in my garage. Hammered it clean, painted it white. Called a friend down at the local print shop. Asked him to print the photo from the article, the note from the binder, the flyer accusing her, and that Polaroid I'd photographed near the tree. He didn't ask questions. Just said, "You gonna need glue or staples in a..." Yeah, yes. I hung it outside the general store, right under the town flag. By noon the next day, it was gone, ripped clean off. But that was the point. I wasn't trying to win. Not yet. I was trying to make them show their teeth, and they did. That evening, Howell showed up at my porch. He looked worse, pale, sweating, like something had crawled into his bones. They visited me?" he said. "Who?" "Veterans Council. Said if I keep talking about her, my benefits could get reviewed. Called me unstable. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. You going to stay quiet?" He looked at me for a long time. Then he said something I'll never forget. I spent most of my life thinking silence was dignity. Turns out, it's just fear with a tie on. He handed me a box. Inside, an old tape recorder, covered in dust. "It's her voice," he said. "I kept it. From that night in the compound. When the radio was jammed and she talked us through an ambush. Told jokes, cursed, sang, kept us sane. I played it after he left. The crackle of static, then her voice. Steady, dry, with just a flicker of sarcasm. I'll pull. If you're bleeding and not breathing, hold up a hand. If you're breathing but want to die, get in line. If you're thinking of quitting, tough. I'm here. That means you don't get to give up yet." I listened to that voice and felt something burn inside me. Next day, I nailed a speaker to the flagpole outside the store, pressed play, and let the town hear her, real loud. I didn't know what would happen, but I knew the silence was over, and the war, whatever form it had taken, was just beginning. It played for almost 6 minutes. Her voice, scratchy and clipped, dancing through the air like smoke over a battlefield. Some paused. Some listened. Most just walked faster, eyes fixed forward like ignoring it would make it disappear. But not all. Old Henry Weber stood under the flagpole with his hat pressed to his chest. Vietnam vet. Never spoke much. Never smiled. That day he wept. Not loud. Not messy. Just quiet tears running down leathery cheeks while her voice kept talking about broken bones, desert wind, and bad jokes in worse situations. By evening, someone had cut the wire. Clean, surgical. I expected that. Had a backup wired before I even mounted the first one. Next morning, I hit play again. And that's when they hit back. Not with fists, with paperwork. 2 uniformed men showed up on my porch. Not cops. Council security. Wearing official jackets like that meant anything. One handed me a notice. Public disturbance. Unauthorized amplification. I laughed. Told them I'd pay their fine when they found their spines. Later that day, my truck got keyed. Deep, angry lines like someone wanted to flay the paint right off. A dead rabbit was stuffed into the tailpipe. Juvenile stuff, but it meant they were rattled. It also meant they'd stopped pretending. I didn't stop the broadcast. I moved the speaker higher. This time, I looped the tape. Let her voice run all morning. Every morning, until folks had no choice but to hear. And they did. Not all. Not most. But enough. A woman dropped off a folded napkin with "Thank you" written in pencil. A teenager asked who the voice belonged to. An old man whispered, I thought I was the only one who remembered her. Then came the knock. Late? Cold? 3 raps. Deliberate. I opened the door to find her standing there. No coat. Just a long-sleeve flannel and jeans. The burns were harsher up close. More real. More raw. But her eyes, those hadn't changed. Still sharp. Still scanning. She didn't smile. Didn't look grateful. Just said, "Turn it off." I didn't. Instead, I stepped back, let her in, and closed the door. We sat, in silence. The air between us thick like smoke that never quite clears. I didn't ask for this, she said eventually. I know. Yet they'll ruin you too. They're trying. She looked around my place. Old photographs. Medals in a drawer half open. A jacket draped over the chair like someone might still wear it. I buried people without names, she said. Held men together with duct tape and morphine. And when I came home, they told me to disappear. Signed a paper. Took the hush check. Figured I could at least buy peace with it. Did it work? She didn't answer. Instead, she stood. Walked to my mantel. Picked up a photo of my wife. She looks kind. She was. She made silence feel safe. Then her voice dropped, just above a whisper. Mine never did. That night she stayed. On the couch. Said she'd be gone by morning. I left a blanket and didn't ask more. At dawn, she was still there. Sitting at the table, drinking coffee she'd made too strong. I want to show you something, she said. We drove. Out past the mills, past the soybean fields, into the woods. Deep, where the road was more hope than gravel. Finally, she stopped at an old, rusted trailer, half covered in ivy. Inside, photos pinned to the walls. Faces, dates, blood types, notes scrawled in code I didn't understand. These were mine, she said, the ones who made it. Each photo had a red string leading to another, like a spider web of survival. You tracked them? Someone had to. Their files didn't always survive. But I remembered their stories. I turned. Looked at her. Really looked. You never stopped serving. She blinked hard. I stopped being seen. That's not the same. As we stepped outside, a black SUV rolled up slow. Tinted windows. No plates. 2 men stepped out. Not locals. Too polished. Too smooth. One of them spoke. Ma'am, we need to speak with you, privately. Her hand brushed mine, almost by accident. But it wasn't. It was a warning. I won't ask again, the man said. She didn't move, and neither did I. That's when I realized the next move wasn't mine. It was hers, and everything depended on whether she was ready to be seen again. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes flicked to the trees behind the trailer, then back to the men. No fear in her expression, just calculation. I'd seen that look before, years ago, in the side mirror of my rig during a blizzard outside Cheyenne, when the snow swallowed the road and all I could do was guess. That same cold calm, when every move might be your last. The taller of the two men stepped forward. "Ma'am, we need to discuss a matter of confidentiality breach related to your past service. There are protocols." "Save it," she cut in, her voice low and even. "You're late." He blinked, thrown for just a second. She turned to me. "I need to go with them." "But not far." I opened my mouth to protest, but she shook her head. "As if they think I'm running, they'll chase harder. Better to walk into the lion's mouth with matches in your pocket." And just like that, she got in their SUV, didn't look back. They drove off slow, like they wanted me to follow. I didn't. Not then. I waited. Counted to 100. Watched the dust settle. Then I went inside the trailer. Sat in her web of red string and faded photos, and listened. Because she'd left something. A recorder, same model as Howell's. Hit play, and her voice crackled through. "If you're hearing this, I've let them take me. Voluntarily. Because the fight has to shift. They control documents, money, memory. But they fear one thing: witnesses. Real ones. And if I disappear now, you become one." She paused. The silence on the tape was long, deliberate. They'll offer you reasons, threats, bribes. Don't believe any of them. Just remember what you saw, what you heard. And if it ever gets loud enough, speak. Click. That was it. I sat there in the dark for what felt like hours. Something heavy settled in my chest. Not fear, not anger, responsibility. She had handed me her whole story without ever once asking me to carry it. And now I couldn't set it down. That night, the town went quiet in a different way. Like something had gone missing. And everyone felt it, but didn't know why. At Ruby's, folks glanced over their shoulders more. No more jokes about Scorchy. Even the council's flyers vanished overnight. Burned, I heard. But the silence didn't last. 3 days later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name in block letters. Inside, a form marked reclassification request. At the bottom, a note scribbled in red ink. You may be entitled to reconsideration for certain benefits, pending cooperation. That's when I knew. They weren't after her anymore. They were testing me. I took the form and drove out to Howell's place. He answered in his robe, coughing like gravel in a blender. They got to you too?" I asked. He nodded. Offered me back pay. Said it was a clerical error. "You believe them?" I believe they're scared. And when cowards get scared, they pay first, shoot second." I told him about the recorder, about the trailer. He sat down slow, like the air had thickened. "You're building something, whether you mean to or not." "No," I said. "She is. I'm just the echo." That night, I set up a new board in my garage. Bigger. Not photos this time. Names. Ones I remembered from her trailer. Ones Howell remembered. We started calling around. Veterans, medics, drivers, The ones who made it home with scars and silence. Some slammed the phone down. Some cried, but a few listened. And one, an old corporal from Wyoming, said, "Took you long enough." That's when I realized we weren't alone. We'd just been scattered. And sometimes all it takes is a map to find your way back to each other. The map was forming, and it had her fingerprints all over it. Names turned into numbers. Numbers turned into stories. And stories, well, they had a weight to them, like bricks in your pockets when you're trying to wade through chest-high water. I wasn't collecting them anymore. I was drowning in them. My garage, once a place for tools and oil stains, had become a war room. Strings mapped connections. Notes taped over every cabinet. Voices echoed through the tape deck. Most of them shaky, some angry, all of them real. She pulled me out by my belt loop, under fire. Never saw her face, just her hands. Up. People forget the ones who didn't carry guns. At first, it was just me and Howell. Then a retired sergeant from Illinois showed up in an RV, parked across my lawn without asking. Said he'd heard about a woman with a burn across her left cheek who once used an IV line as a tourniquet in a cave outside Fallujah. Stayed for dinner, never left. Then came Melody, 30 years old. Former interpreter. Drove 3 states to hand-deliver a worn diary with 6 dog tags folded inside. Said she owed that woman everything. Didn't stay long, didn't need to. The network was building itself, but with it came heat. One night, around 2 a.m., I heard tires crunch gravel outside. Porch light flickered. When I stepped out, the RV's windshield had been smashed. Spray paint across the hood. Traitors. We cleaned it up in silence. Didn't call the sheriff. Didn't bother. Folks like us knew the difference between law and justice. Sometimes they shook hands. Sometimes they never met. Instead, we went deeper underground. Howell found an old CB frequency still active. We started sharing stories at night. Veterans joined in. Some used fake names. Others didn't care. One by one, voices came through the static, weaving a patchwork of memories into something louder than a whisper. And still, no word from her until the package arrived. Plain box, no return address, inside a red scarf, a flash drive, and a burned photograph. The flash drive held 1 video file. Dated 2 weeks prior, grainy. Shot in what looked like a sterile conference room. She sat in a chair, same burns, same eyes, but something was different. Her voice, when it came, was level, controlled, but her fingers drummed the table like a countdown. They think silence is containment. They confuse suppression with stability. But the truth is like smoke. It slips through cracks, and once it reaches air, it spreads. She looked directly at the camera. This is my air. End clip. The burned photograph was of her, young, unscarred, grinning. Arms wrapped around a group of locals in desert gear, handing out supplies. Behind them, a mural. A painted eagle with a ribbon in its beak that read, "Mercy is stronger than bullets." Whoever sent it had tried to erase her, but she'd mailed her past before they could finish the job. I made copies, dozens. We mailed them to every person in the network. No captions, no instructions. Just the image, just the video. That was the beginning of the breach. Within a week, a retired colonel went public on a radio show. Claimed he'd been forced to redact reports from a field medic operating without clearance. Described her burns, her tattoo, her voice. Then he vanished. No explanation. Station pulled the segment, but it didn't matter. The truth was out, and it wasn't ours to bury anymore. They started showing up at my house. Reporters. Not local ones. National. I sent them away. All of them. Because this wasn't their story to spin. It wasn't for headlines. It was for the ones who had almost disappeared. And the one who still could. Then, the call came. Blocked number. Static first. Then her voice. You've done more than I asked. You're not done yet, I said. A pause. Then, meet me. One last time. She gave coordinates. Not an address. A ridgeline past Hollow Creek. Where cell towers quit and roads get personal. I loaded my truck, because when ghosts call you by name, you don't ask questions. You follow. The ridgeline was old and quiet. Pines leaned in like they were listening. Wind curled around the rocks in low moans. And the sky had that heavy, coppery tint it gets before a storm but doesn't quite deliver. My boots sank into soft mud as I stepped from the truck. A thermos in one hand, flashlight in the other. I left the engine running, lights off. She was already there, sitting on a flat rock near the edge, coat drawn tight around her, scarf wrapped up to her cheek. The burns peeked through anyway. She didn't look up as I approached, just said, "Didn't think you'd come. You gave me coordinates. That's more courtesy than most." She chuckled. Dry. Tired. Didn't think I'd ever give anyone anything again. I handed her the thermos. She didn't say thank you, didn't have to. We sat in silence, watching the valley breathe below. The town was just a scatter of warm lights in the distance. So small, so far away. You know what they did after the hospital was shelled? She said, voice low. They moved us. Off the books. Said our records were corrupted. Said we'd be safer that way. Safer from what? From memory. The wind shifted. A bird somewhere called twice and went silent. She pulled a folder from her bag. Slim. Weathered. I wasn't supposed to keep this, but I did. Inside were names. Dates. Coordinates. Photos. I recognized a few. Some were on my wall now. Others had called in. She pointed to a page marked with a red X. That's the last one I could confirm alive. After that, they stopped responding. How many left? Maybe 12? Maybe 2. Depends on who's still brave. She closed the folder, exhaled hard. And they're building something. Not just silence. Infrastructure. Rewriting the chain of memory. Purging names from logs. Anyone who served in proximity to our unit is being administratively reclassified. Retroactively. You see what that means? I did. If the past doesn't exist, then neither does the debt owed to it. She looked at me then. Really looked. I'm not trying to be a hero. I just want it to stop. I want to live without erasing myself every time someone asks me what I did. I nodded. Then asked the question I'd been holding in my throat for days. Why me? She stared off again, then said, "Because you looked at me like I wasn't broken. Just weathered." That did something to my chest I wasn't ready for. We sat until the clouds thickened. Then she stood. I need to disappear for a while. Surface somewhere unexpected. Make noise in a place they're not watching. I can stall them here. You already are. She handed me a flash drive. Final recordings, coordinates, timelines. One is a deposition. Howell's voice is on it. Yours too. I blinked. When, that first night, when you played me through the speaker, I was listening, recording. You didn't know, but you meant it. Then she handed me something else. A patch. Frayed at the edges, charred slightly. Black background. Red symbol. The insignia of her unofficial unit. I need you to take this to someone, she said. He'll know what it means. Who? She smiled. Real, for the first time. You'll know when you see him. He still walks like a soldier, but sits like a man who lost the war. Then she turned, walked into the trees, and didn't look back. I waited until her footsteps were gone. Then I sat back down on the rock. I didn't cry, didn't speak, just stared at the lights below and felt the full weight of inheritance settle in. When I got home, there were new flyers on my fence. Different tone now. Not smear campaigns, just polite inquiries about my involvement in certain circulating claims. The phrasing chilled me. They weren't trying to discredit us anymore. They were preparing to absorb us. To package our story, polish it, and hang it in a display case under controlled lighting. I tore the flyers down. Because the truth wasn't something you framed. It was something you carried. I spent the next 48 hours doing nothing that looked heroic. Fixed a busted fence post. Repaired a leak under the kitchen sink. Restacked wood. Ordinary things, deliberate things. Like I needed my hands to remember they belonged to a man. Not a message. But every time I glanced at the flash drive, I felt the pulse of it, like a vein under pressure. I hadn't listened to it yet. Not all of it. Just enough to know she'd told the truth in every breath. Enough to hear Howell's broken voice say, "We thought dying was the worst part. Turns out, being forgotten hurts more." Then came the visitor. Late afternoon. Sun slung low behind the barn. A man walked up my driveway, slow. No car, no dust, just appeared, like something out of the tall grass. Tall, lean, close-cropped hair, tan jacket. Walked like he could still call cadence in his sleep. But his eyes looked like someone who'd memorized the ceiling of too many hospital rooms. He didn't speak at first, just held out his hand. I gave him the patch. He stared at it. Then tucked it into his breast pocket without a word. "You knew her," I said. I buried half our unit," he answered. "She buried the rest." We sat under the carport. No introductions, no posturing, just shared air. I handed him the thermos. Coffee long gone cold. He drank it anyway. "Che, they're going to hold a memorial," he said finally. "For who?" "Fakbar for her. Quiet. Controlled. Carefully worded. Won't mention her name. Just a field medical asset lost in conflict. And then? They'll roll out a statement. Close the file. Bury it under a dozen others. The press will call it closure. The council will call it resolved. And what do you call it?" He looked at me. No softness in his voice. "Shame or betrayal." That night, we played the full drive. Every second. Her deposition. Her story. The names. The timelines. The gaps. And at the end, something new. A voice we hadn't heard before. Another woman. Young. Civilian. She spoke clearly, like someone reading a prepared statement, but not trusting a word of it. I was instructed to alter documents tied to the Galatz 7 unit. I was told to flag any reoccurring names for removal from digital archives. I didn't know why. I didn't ask. Until I saw the photo. She choked up, then whispered. She smiled like she wasn't supposed to exist. And that broke me. It ended there. We sat in silence. Then he stood. I have something to show you. We drove west, past the ridge, onto land I hadn't walked in years. The kind of place that doesn't show up on maps. He led me to a rusted metal door half buried in earth. Underground bunker, maybe Cold War era. Inside, filing cabinets, maps, burned folders, fragments of what used to be memory before someone tried to rewrite it. Why keep this? I asked. Because someday someone would need to remember. I realized then we weren't building a resistance. We were building an ark, not to fight them, not to take back headlines or policy, but to keep the truth dry for when the flood came. That week, we moved the archive piece by piece into a storage unit under Howell's name. Quiet, steady. Each night, a little more vanished from public view. Not destroyed, just relocated. Protected. We stopped answering calls from reporters. We stopped sharing updates. Not because the fire had gone out, but because the smoke had drawn too much attention. She was gone. Again, but her echo filled every room. I saw it in the way Henry Weber started volunteering at the clinic, in the way Melody organized care packages for shut-in veterans, in the way teenagers stopped laughing at scars and started asking questions. This wasn't about noise anymore. This was about roots. And sometimes the quietest things grow the strongest. One night, the soldier came back, dropped an envelope on my table. Inside, a single photo. Recent. Her sitting on the steps of a school in another state. Hair longer, wrapped in a scarf, watching children play like she belonged to the moment. He didn't say a word, just nodded and left. She was alive. And maybe, for the first time, free. I didn't frame the photo. I pinned it to my garage wall, among the names, the maps, the scars, not as an artifact, but as a continuation. I didn't plan the ending. Hell, I didn't even know it was coming until it was already halfway through me. That's the thing about stories like this. They don't wrap up. They fade, settle into the cracks, echo down the hallways of quieter lives. A month passed, then another. The house quieted. The soldiers left. The calls stopped. Howell's health turned, slow but certain, like a tide heading out for good. We didn't talk about it. He'd sit by the board some nights, fingers resting on a photo of her, eyes seeing some dessert none of us could touch. "Promise me something," he said once. "If they come again, don't protect the story. Protect the people." "I will." He nodded, like that was enough. He died 3 days later. Peacefully, if that word can mean anything for a man who carried so many ghosts. We buried him with a patch stitched inside his coat. No name on the stone, just a line I carved myself. The ones who remained. After that, it all seemed to shrink. The pressure eased. The silence turned soft. The council never followed up. Maybe they found another file to burn. Maybe they were just tired. Or maybe the story outgrew their grip. I kept the garage, but I covered the board. Not out of fear, out of respect. Some truths don't need banners, they need breath. Then, one morning, the mail came. Thick envelope. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Neat. Small. Precise. Inside, a photo of a mural. Same eagle as the one in the burned picture she'd sent months back. But this time, the ribbon in its beak read, "She came back for us." Below it, kids stood smiling. A mix of ages, colors, faces. And standing among them, her, no scarf, just her. Hair short now, burn scars visible. Unapologetic. Alive. There was also a folded note. I started teaching science, of all things. Turns out, survival makes you a good teacher. The town doesn't ask questions. They just listen. Sometimes that's enough. She didn't sign it. She didn't need to. I pinned that photo too. Not on the board, but above the door, where the sun hits every morning. Let it bleach gently. Let it become part of the house. One night I hosted a dinner. Small. Just the ones still around. Henry, the interpreter. The soldier. Even Melody came back. Brought lemon pie and a laugh that hadn't shown itself in months. We didn't talk about her much. Not directly. But she was there. In the way people leaned in when others spoke. In the way no one looked away from old wounds. Before everyone left, the soldier handed me something wrapped in cloth. "From the archive," he said. "Only copy. It's yours now." I unwrapped it after they were gone. It was the audio file. The one that started everything. Her voice. That first night. The jokes. The calm under fire. The fury disguised as compassion. I didn't cry, but I sat there in the dark and let her words run again. And for the first time, I let myself believe we'd done it. Not won. That's not the right word. Not survived either. Preserved. Because some victories don't shout. They whisper. And some people don't need medals. They need to be remembered by the right hearts. I turned off the player, stepped outside. The night was thick with summer heat. Frogs croaking near the creek, and wind that smelled like pine and dust. I looked toward the hills. Didn't see her. Didn't need to. She was already everywhere. And the war was over, for her and for me,